We are live on Oz Property Investors. We bring the big names and we have the big fun. And we're late, unfortunately, but that's okay. We were dominating about taking over the world. But Azeem, because that's what you are doing as Azeem. Welcome to this is going to be a huge session. You have a power-packed 10 PowerPoint slide coming up. We have Steve's first guest co-host, special co-host appearance. We call him the special co-host. He's got his own little
special is the not normal special.
Yeah, exactly. That's what we get. So it's going to be a huge session because we're going to unpack how to build that multi-million-dollar property portfolio and the mistakes you can make along the way as well. So as things are coming along, how are you going anyway? What's happening, man?
Well, I think all the action's happening State of Origin tonight, which is interesting. I only thought about that in the morning, realizing, we're going to be chatting today and State of Origin's happening. So interesting.
Okay. Man, Queensland, you might as well just put them up against the West Tigers. Hopefully, I've just offended about half our audience out there. The West Tigers, I think they'd be a fair match between those two sides. Don't worry about New South Wales. New South Wales is going to beat them by about 30 points probably tonight. But anyway, enough of that. It's a big session. You're a footy fan. Steve, how are you going, man? You growing your beard?
All the way from UK, Europe. So I'm here for the next kind of couple of months, enjoying the passive income life. Got Glastonbury next week. That's like 200,000 people with the festival. I'm taking my 2-year-old, so that's going to be exciting.
She'll be partying harder than you, man. I think like dancing around. Like, is it going to rain?
I have no idea. Normally it does, but we'll see how we go. Funnily enough, we weren't going to take her, and then we spoke to a few friends, and they're like, no, there's actually a whole camping field for families that has like huge playgrounds, face painting, blah, blah, blah. And I'm not drinking anymore as well, so I'm like, I don't want to be out 4 days on a bender, so I'll do the dad thing, and then when she goes to sleep, me and my partner can do one night on, one night off.
Oh, how good is that? So as it's going to be, we want to make this interactive as we can. So if you have questions for Az about his portfolio, how it's built, there's going to be some spicy topics throughout as well. One of those might be, can you buy for under 500K these days? So stay tuned for that because that is something that I think, I don't know, I'm interested. I was speculating on some locations earlier on before we jumped on. But for the person you're on a lot of podcasts. You're on Mike Mortlock's, you're on Bushy's, you're on a whole bunch. So, and I heard you're on Duotax as well. Shouldn't be plugging other people's podcasts. That's all right. We've got enough viewers. There's enough viewers to go around. Abundance Post Property. Here we go. You are a PAYG, put your income to work. You've built that $3 million plus. It could even be $5 million now. But I don't know, maybe it's inflation. So we've grown exponentially from scratch. You started at 24, which great age to start, without the roadmap or formal education. So you don't have the agenda to promote, but you are prolific on LinkedIn. So if you want to see Az's amazing insights and wisdom, follow him on LinkedIn. I'll plug that later on tonight. But welcome to the thing. So first question, mate. Do you want to bring up these?
On a side note, the part of Az is what I like about Az is LinkedIn and that it's not fluff. Like most people, like especially buyers agents that have an agenda, are just plugging something of how good it is, but he's actually just giving the core education, which I really like.
Yeah. Before we go, I'll go on a tangent. What motivated you to start that as anyway? Like the education piece? Is it because there's too many agendas out there? What made you want to start that?
What made me want to start that was actually just sort of peeking into the future and thinking about the fact that when I do have children, when they're in a position where they would like to invest in property and they start to go out there and have a look at the world of information that's out there, it'd be a shame if they found out a bit later down the track or they never got to find out that their dad actually had a lot of hands-on experience in the first place. So that's where the thinking initially came from, was there's a lot of experience that I've built up along the way. Probably most of it has been mistakes rather than successes, if I'm to be honest, but it was a good opportunity to have a conversation down the track with my kids about what the learnings have been, what are the insights that I've picked up. And that's where it started from, to actually put this all down on paper in articles and on LinkedIn.
How ironic that we're talking about the negatives of property and we've got the sirens going off.
Yeah, that's right. It was all part of the plan.
part of the shazzle.
If we're not talking negative about property, I promise. If you get rated because we're talking negative, if I get rated, it could be me. Jeez, I better check out. But no, it's interesting we say that because property isn't all it's cracked up to be. There are mistakes, and we've made plenty of mistakes. Well, I have, Steve. I won't talk on your behalf, but there's mistakes I've made in terms of property managers, and that's going to be one of the ones that we'll go through. But I think what is it? Before we get to that first mistake you made, what motivated you to start that property portfolio? Is it the passive income, 150K in 10 years? Is that the goal, or you just want to sort of put your money to work somewhere? What was the reason?
There was no goal. There was no vision. There was no real plan in place. And let's be real, in this day and age, it's very rare to come across a 24-year-old who's switched on and knows exactly what they're trying to do and has a strategy. So I think that's very rare. So I was like everyone else. I had no clue. But what I did know from a very young age is that property is a means to an end. It is an asset class that everyone loves to talk about. And let's be honest, in every household, whether it's with your family, your relatives, somehow property always comes up for discussion. So there was enough discussions happening growing up as a kid where I was able to put 2 and 2 together to know that property investing is something that can generate wealth from. How to go about it, I didn't know, but that much was clear for me. So I thought, okay, I definitely want to go down this route when I get older, and that's where it kick-started.
I love that you're actually honest about there was no plan, because I always, like Jeff was always saying to people like, oh yeah, I want 100K, 150K. When you're buying your first property, there is no way you're educated enough to even know how to get there. You're literally trying to buy something that's either got good cash flow or good capital growth, and that's your knowledge. Like, I've done 2,000 deals and I'm still making mistakes. So good luck to the person on their first one having a foolproof plan that's going to work well over 10 years.
Yeah. I love your I agree as well. Rather than, I wasn't born when I first went for that, and I did use a buyer's agent first up, full transparency. This is 10 years ago, in the infancy of buyer's agents. Maybe not infancy, that's a bit of a porky perhaps, but no, it was interesting because I said the same thing. I said I wanted capital growth without too much cash flow, and I suppose I went with that, and I just trusted that person knew what that meant to me. But anyway. On that, so Steve, yeah, it is hard to know what you want from the start, but if you don't start, then you'll never figure out what you actually want. So on that point, sorry to
play up, Jeff. Do you want to know, funny enough, my one was actually jealousy is why I started my portfolio. So
who are you jealous of, your brother?
I went to high school with Nathan Birch, so I knew him. And then at the time he had like 10 properties. And I was sitting there being like, how's this guy got 10 properties? I'm sitting here working my butt off studying engineering for 5 years and grafting to earn 60, 70 grand a year. And there was jealousy. I was like, well, if he can do it, then I'm going to have a crack and do it myself. And then started following all the other kind of young gurus. And so the thing that kickstarted me was just jealousy.
Wow. That's it. Yeah, I don't think I've ever heard you say that, Steve. Maybe you have, but what are people's reasons for property investing? Drop that in the comments. And there's been some spicy questions on the proposed $3 million labor cap as well. But before we'll get to that, because I think that could be interesting. What was your first number one mistake that you think people are making?
Let me pull up my screen.
Here's one I prepared earlier. He says. We go.
It's funny when you do the prep before going live, everything happens smoothly. As soon as you get on live, it's panic stations.
No panic. This is pure, absolutely rehearsed synchronization. So key mistakes stopping you building, I would say, a multi-million-dollar property portfolio, because you're in the $3 million. And Steve, I think we can all attest to making some of these mistakes. And it's easy to make them, but I suppose it's reassuring in some extent, because if you made the mistakes, you can come back for them, because you've got that as well. So 10 things to be aware of as property investors. So
I'd say, Jeff, half my portfolio were mistake purchases, and I've still got a large portfolio. So you can come back.
I made lots of mistakes, but yeah, go on. So first, is this in no particular order?
No, it's in no particular order, but I think one of the biggest mistakes is the fact that you can end up actually purchasing property that doesn't increase in value. And there's two parts to it. You can end up purchasing a property that doesn't increase in value at all, or you end up purchasing a property that won't grow in value until a very long time has passed. We're talking 5 years plus. And that is an interesting thing, because as we were just talking earlier, when I started off and I didn't have a plan, I just assumed that you can just throw money at this thing and it'll just grow up in value. And that's what most people think, because they're not educated. But sadly, that's not the case. Contrary to popular belief, not all investment properties do appreciate in value. Now, we could, again, talk on and on about this at length, and all of the other mistakes too, about, what are the key reasons and the drivers and the root cause. But the top 5 that I've seen from my hands-on experience why property's value won't increase is, number one, it's purchased at the peak of the market.
Yep.
Number two, supply is exceeding demand. Number three, you've got poor suburb fundamentals. Number four, it's not an ideal property location. And number five, it's a poor property selection in itself as well too. So just to share an example for me personally, the first property that I purchased was in that category where it didn't go in value increase at the start, but it did as time went on. And in that case, when I look at these five that are here, the ones that were applicable for the first property was number two, number three, and number five. So in the suburb that I purchased here in Sydney, the supply was exceeding the demand. It had poor suburb fundamentals. So when I say poor suburb fundamentals, I'm talking things like the vacancy rates were quite high. It didn't actually have a lot of building approvals that were going ahead as well too in the area. And the actual property itself, number five, it was a poor property selection. It was an apartment that was selected, which doesn't cater to everybody, right? When you think about owner-occupiers and investors, it doesn't cater to everybody in an apartment, and especially if it's just a one-bedroom. So in my case, there were the couple of reasons why it didn't go up. And I dare say there are many other people who have experienced this, that this is a key mistake that gets made.
Yeah, I think you might need to change the slide pack, man, because we're not seeing the audiences, and I'm not either. Unless, Steve, are you seeing any slide change? Sorry,
I'm seeing key mistakes stopping you build a portfolio.
Yeah. You might have, anyway. No, I absolutely agree. Because so your first purchase was, I don't know if I didn't ask if we're talking about the portfolio and whether I purchased, but was it an apartment? Or was it as?
Yes, it was. It was an apartment, and I think it was purely based on what I could afford at the time. So there wasn't a lot of thinking. It was just how much deposit is available, what can I borrow within that capacity, and that sort of shifted the dial for me to just focus on what was in my control. There was no other thought process there to go, let's look at the suburb, let's look at the actual property within the suburb and the location. Like, none of that was thinking there. And funnily enough, that's where the issues come from if you haven't ticked your boxes. Has that come through now?
Yeah, it's up.
Do you think that was because I've seen a lot of people obviously they go buy an apartment because they're already fixated on the location. They're like, this is where I want to buy. Can't afford a house, so I'm going to go like an apartment. Was that the kind of mindset of why you did it at the time, as opposed to just trying to find a cheaper location to get a house, or was just negligence? You just didn't know at the time what you don't know. And as someone I've also bought an apartment, so there's no judgment, obviously.
Yeah, no, just purely didn't know what I didn't know. Just purely went on what's affordable, what's close by, what can I go and see and drive by, and off I went and put an offer.
Yeah. And was that also, so when you said what was the lead up to purchasing that first property? Did you, you sort of said you didn't have that strategic sort of kind of, I want to build 150K, but did you go to your broker, or did you, how did you sort of lead up to the process of buying the property?
It was about a couple of years of just saving up, which took, I think I had about $50,000 I was saved up after 2 years' time. And the minute that I had enough available to then purchase, and off I went. So, yeah, simple as that. Went to the bank, had a conversation, and off you went. So, yeah, there was, I would say, compared to the last property purchase, compared to the first one, the amount of mistakes have definitely reduced. But, yeah, there was just, I was just bleeding mistakes from the start. And again, you don't know what you don't know. And I was just so over the moon that I've purchased my first property. As time went on, these things that, you can see on the slide, they became more apparent to me as time went on.
Were you trying to just amalgamate knowledge from everywhere, or did you sort of like me, I had these online mentors of people I was just trying to follow, or were you just, like I said, just getting information from everywhere, just going, this looks like a good buy, let's buy it?
It was probably the latter, actually. I didn't really seek a lot of information to start with. It wasn't until the second property purchase where I started to reach out to educate myself. And it just progressively, as each purchase I went through from each property purchase, I actually realized, there's so much I don't still know, because I wasn't repeating the same mistakes, but there were new mistakes that I was making. And it reinforced for me how much I need to focus on education. So it just progressively just grew over time, Steve, how much I spent on education. It definitely wasn't there for the first. It started from the second, and it just continued to grow. And it still does to this day.
It's funny. So every day I have to have a conversation with people about why commercial is higher risk in quotation marks compared to residential. But every successful residential buyer that I've ever met has made lots of mistakes, and quite big ones as well, like hundreds of thousands of dollars mistakes. but they say residential safer. So it's just like, it's like you said, it's what you don't know, you don't know.
Yeah, that's it's very interesting, like not knowing, because with your sort of purchase around, did you I suppose think about just when was this? Were you talking sort of 2016, 2017 as? Or that's what I was going to ask or wanted to ask.
This purchase, yeah, this was in 2017.
Yeah, okay, crazy. Sydney. Somebody said, "Do you guys recommend a property coach?" Sonam's mentioned that. I mean, depends on what is a property coach, I suppose. Like, are we talking somebody who sort of shouts at you and goes all, what's that?
I think that they're talking about some form of mentor or that. I'll answer that question for me.
Yep.
Yes, but the hardest part is knowing who to trust and who's a good mentor. Like, there's plenty of people with successful portfolios that know nothing, and there's plenty of people with little 3-4 property portfolios that know quite a lot. So getting that person and then having them to have an incentive to actually help you. Like, you can claim everyone's a nice person, but ultimately, if someone's really successful, they're going to want to be paid for their time, and hence the world of buyer's agents existed.
Yeah, because as you started, a lot of the content that I was reading before, you didn't have the mentor, the roadmap, or any of that sort of information. So how did you? Do you see? What is, I suppose, a property coach for you? Because you probably evolved and got educated and all that. You see value in the mentor, or the property coach, whatever we're calling this person.
Yeah, absolutely. Look, I've got a slightly different view on this purely because of my corporate background. That there's a difference between a coach and a mentor in a professional sense, and I think that applies in this case too. So for me, a property coach is somebody who can roll up their sleeves with you and help you to understand how to actually have those skills to do it successfully. Whereas a mentor is someone who you can go to on a regular basis or when you need to have a chat of a specific problem at a specific point in time or an issue that you're facing to talk to. So yeah, I absolutely see the benefit of having a property coach, particularly if you want to be more hands-on and you want to learn how to do it successfully yourself.
Yeah, that's vital. You actually and somebody's popped in. Are you paying people to get in the audience, Steve? Steve loved your books. Sonam's asked a question and then he said, we will talk about that. But no, it's interesting you say that, because I sort of bought my first two without any kind of mentor as well. And then I paid for some education with Steve Ignite, and that was in 2017. That's where Joe and I's eyes met, and he looked at me and I looked the other way. So no, I didn't say I didn't say that.
That was getting very romantic very quickly, and as you guys glancing across the auditorium at each other.
He remembers it. I don't actually. He's like, oh yeah, we had that. I was like, I probably spoke to 100 people, went out to the Star a couple of nights. But anyway, enough about my debauchery. So that's where I was faced with a decision as to whether to pay a good amount of money at the time. It was like $6,000 for a property course, and for me, I was like, crap, that's a lot of money. But I'm glad that I did, even though yes, the information was amazing, fantastic. It's more about the people that I met. So anyway, we've got on a tangent there. Sorry, guys. So overpaying for a property. What does this mean?
So, and I put this there because I was thinking about what's the best way to articulate this. And I thought about it, and this is really true in my experience, that if you can't assess the value of an asset, someone will set the price for you. And again, similar to, the property prices not going up and the reasons why, overpaying, again, there are many reasons, and these are some of them. And in fact, these are kind of interrelated as well. They're not sort of in isolation. They go hand in hand a bit. The first one is accepting the listed price as gospel on real estate and domain. The second is emotions taking the driver's seat. The third is the market moves very rapidly. And the fourth one is being time poor and impatient. And the fifth one, relying heavily on the sales agent. And I'll just touch upon a few of these. When the vast majority of Australians are not what we would call a professional investor or an intentional investor. So when they see that there's an advertisement for a property for 550, similar to how I started, Jeff and Steve, you look at it and you go, yep, that's how much it's worth. It took me quite some time to rewire my brain. Every time I look at a price guide or an actual amount listed on real estate and domain, I've now trained myself to say, okay, that's how much the vendor thinks it's worth, or that's how much the vendor would like to sell it for. So you have to get into a position to think of that, because it's what they want to sell it for and how much it's actually worth, there is a gap there. So I think that's a big mistake that a lot of investors fall into. I certainly have. The second is emotions then taking the driver's seat. And now emotions could be a whole range. They could be frustration because you're missing out on a lot of opportunities. It could be because you're getting dejected because every time you call up and speak to an agent, they just say, oh, that's already been gone under offer, or it's already been sold. Or you could actually start to get a little bit of fear of missing out because you're noticing that everybody else is getting these properties in that particular suburb, but you're not. And I found myself with that case with my second property purchase. All of those things that I just mentioned, I went through that. I had those experiences. And so when I did eventually find a particular property in the suburb, I immediately said, yep, I'm ready to put an offer on it. And I actually, in fact, put down $5,000 more than what it was listed for at the time. Mm-hmm. Now, this is where it gets really interesting because it was actually purchased for more than what it's worth. Come bank valuation time, I'm sure you can know where I'm going with this. The bank came back and said that it's actually not worth how much you've actually purchased it for. So now you've got a shortfall. Now, I was very fortunate from the first property that it had some equity built in there that I was able to quickly extract at the time. But just imagine, boys, if I didn't have that equity, it would be an absolute shit show. I don't even know what I would be thinking, the stress I'd be going through. Do I back out of this deal now? Do I not? This is real stuff that can actually happen. And this is a real mistake that I've made. So you have to be very careful when it comes to finding that balance between not offering so low that you're not being considered seriously, but not overpaying to a point where the bank will come back and say, hey, we can't actually give you the loan.
Yeah, there's a question on YouTube I'll get you to answer first, but I want to touch on something there. It's my pet peeve when my buyers literally start talking about the listing price. I'm like, it has nothing to do with anything because they always think like below the listing price they're buying well. But funnily enough, if they're trying to buy a house in like Sydney, the auction price is always more than the listing price. So it goes both ways, but the listing price has nothing to do with anything. It's a real estate agent set in an arbitrary number, and that's it. I would say probably 1 in 5 of the properties we buy, we actually pay over the listing price. And that's actually okay if you've actually done the actual analysis in the CMA, which is the question on YouTube. So the question on YouTube is, how do you do your CMA, so comparable market analysis in hot markets, and how have you trained yourself to not overpay?
I think with the CMA, I think so. There's a couple of things there. One is to, you can do your desktop research, which is to have a look at the sales that have occurred in the last 3 to 6 months, preferably the less time, the better. And then you need to spend the time to look at it like for like as much as possible to look like for like. So when I say like for like, if you're looking to purchase a freestanding house, then you need to look at freestanding houses. If you're looking at a block size that's about 500 square meters, then you got to be looking within the vicinity of 500 square meters, borrowing a little bit there. Same configuration of the property, bedroom, bathroom, garage, and so forth. Now that's obviously on paper, but then what's happening on the ground is another thing. So when you start to actually pick up the phone and speak to a sales agent and understand about and ask them questions on a property that's for sale or how much it's sold for, majority of the time they're not going to tell you exactly how much it's sold for, but you'll start to get a sense by the questions you ask, or if you're getting knocked back on your offers, if your CMA is actually stacking up with what's happening in the market. And to answer this question, if it's particularly in a hot market, 9 out of 10 times what will happen is if you've done your analysis and it's meant to be about 450, chances are actually properties will be selling for 475, 480, even more. So you then need to index that in as well to take that into consideration. And that's what I've done in the past.
It's also powerful for negotiations. If you know how to actually find comparable properties, you use them as the basis of your negotiation. So the agent's hard to argue if you say, I found this property, it's XYZ like it, blah, 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 blah. That's why I'm offering this figure. They'll take you seriously. And then it's on them to actually come back and say, well, no, this one should be more for XYZ. And they have to go like, oh, it's a newer kitchen, blah, blah, bigger land. So you can actually, that's part of the negotiation, which we've seen with Scott Agate 1,000 times on this podcast.
Could I'd be a little bit controversial though, because I've had that, and Joe and I've had this back and forth about the whole like telling the agent about that. The agent actually doesn't give too many shits about what that property down 123 Smith Street. They will know what it's sold for, but they're like, well, I've got an offer at 500. 475 just isn't going to get it done. So that property down the road to sell for that. I to some extent I do agree. I love to have that in my back pocket. And I see some people try and do it. It hasn't, maybe I'm just not that great a negotiator. But also, and that's where I'd say emotions, maybe emotion needs to be somewhere in there, because are you just going to keep sticking to the numbers, the calculator, and saying, okay, I'm going to keep missing out. I mean, commercial, I think, needs to be numbers driven. But residential, you could sort of say, if you're in a rising market, particularly the start of a rising market, are you missing out by just keep sort of not paying by $5,000, and then next minute you're sort of 6 or 12 months in and you've missed out on 10, 20, 25% growth. I mean, I don't know.
You've just touched on the most important point. Is it actually depends on what market you're in. So in a cold market, very hot. A hot market, like you can't choose a comparable for 6 months ago. You actually need to find ones like in that market. But the point you mentioned about overpaying, that's also okay. And we've seen this with like anyone who's bought in Adelaide or Perth in the last couple of years. Like you were not getting something below listing price. Like you just weren't.
Or a commercial shopping center in Logan, apparently, as well.
Yeah, or my shopping center consciously overpaid about $175,000 for it, and I've actually made that back already 6 months later.
Oh, okay. Here we go. This is an interesting one. Elijah said, and I'm interested in your thoughts on this one as well. As heavy light, don't trust the agent; they have zero other offers. I don't always agree with that.
I couldn't agree more. I mean, that talks to number 5 there. Heavily relying on the sales agent, and again, majority of Australians and investors, they're not sophisticated enough to actually know how to hold a conversation with a sales agent, how to ask them the right questions, how to read between the lines. So yeah, we often fall in the trap, and I have, where you just whatever they say, you'll take it as gospel. If I picked up the phone and I'm speaking to Jeff and say, Jeff, how much interest have you had? And Jeff says to me, I've had 10 people already call me in the last 30 minutes since I put it on Real Estate Domain. How the heck do I know that's the truth or not? I actually have nothing to substantiate that, particularly if I'm interstate. So yeah, absolutely. Really, really question everything that a sales agent says, and don't treat it as gospel.
Yeah.
What's a good
by law, if you ask them, do they have any offers on contracts, they have to tell you. In my 10-year experience, there's a reason agents always talk to you on the phone and never write anything in email, because they can always deny.
Yeah. I then typically say, well, if you got this interest, how many offers have you gotten, and when are you going to close it then? And then they say, oh, well, yeah. If they're backtracking, it's like, okay, well, I appreciate you've got an offer at 500. I see value at 480. Let's get this inspected. I want to move in this deal today. And then I'll say, oh, that sounds really good, actually. And then, but yeah, I mean, yeah, and that's typically where you start to sort out the wheat from the chaff. And then if they say, no, we're going to go for 500, then they'll sell it for 500.
You should know your top price that you're happy to pay for that property anyway. So then the art of negotiation is how you play the numbers before that, of how quickly you potentially get up to the number if you do get to that number. That's the art of negotiation. As an investor, you should know your top number. The aim of negotiation is to try to get it for a little bit less than that.
Yeah. I love the questions coming through. And do you recommend avoiding the agent, just putting a written offer in? No, I don't recommend that, because you could have got it for a lot less than what you actually offered. So I think the conversation is important, and then kind of trying to sniff through and wade through. What are your thoughts? So you just go straight to the offer? What do you reckon?
No, not at all. Look, realistically, it doesn't take that long to have a conversation with an agent, so it's not worth the risk. Irrespective of the market and the property and how good it is to risk a 10-minute conversation or a 15-minute conversation to go and do it. No, you'll always get some sort of value out of it. And I think that the better you can get with your questions, but also with listening and active listening, it's definitely worth it as well too. You may not get as much as you thought you'd get out of it, but I certainly wouldn't bypass it.
Depending on the state you're buying in anyway, you're going to have had to have chatted with the agent to organise a building and pest inspection, this and that. You're not just going to blindly find an ad on realestate.com and be like, send me a contract and then send it to them, unless you actually are buying something for like development potential or something like that. But even then, a chat with the agent is still going to pay some dividends.
Yeah. Oh, here we go. We're talking negative about property. We're talking real estate agents. REI and New South Wales are coming after us now. We had a real estate agent this is an interesting tidbit, hold back an offer on us when we were selling one of our houses, and they didn't disclose. It was only until we went with another real estate agent to sell a house that we found out the offer was made. That's very interesting. I don't understand why you would do that. Is it because the other off? It's just insane that somebody would do that. But I suppose there's some interesting individuals in every industry. Kwesi Abenzas asked, I don't know if we're going to solve this solution, this one. I've got my views and opinions, but he's asking, does Housing Commission impact capital growth? What are your thoughts on that, and Steve's probably got an opinion, but we'll go through to a guest first.
Look, I haven't personally had a lot of experience with that because the properties that I have purchased haven't been even remotely close to it. So I don't think that would be the case. But my Steve, be keen to hear your thoughts on this because of how many transactions you see. But my gut would say is, even if there's a very small pocket or they're spread out around a particular suburb, and even if you happen to say purchase one that's very close to it, if overall at a macro level the suburb has strong fundamentals, I think in the long term I'd be confident to say I think it would still grow in value. Maybe not as much as the other properties in other locations that are more ideal, but I wouldn't say it wouldn't grow in value in the long term. I think it would still grow.
Yep, spot on. So there's probably two aspects of this. There's housing commission in every suburb. So people that think like, oh, don't buy in that area, it's a housing commission. I live on the Northern Beaches. There's housing commission in Manly. There's housing commission in Freshwater where I live. Like they're actually everywhere. You still get the same capital growth. However, you want to come in and buy at a lower price compared to the non-housing commission. So let's just use some numbers. If you buy a suburb that's $500,000 10 years ago, hopefully that's worth $1 million now. The housing commission one is probably only worth $920,000, $930,000. But when you bought it, you shouldn't have been paying $500,000 for it. You probably should have been paying $460,000, for instance, or $450,000. So you can get the same capital growth there. The issue comes in this perfect timing for this. The repairs and maintenance and the other headaches is the argument. And I'm not saying at all that housing commission means you're going to have bad tenants, but there might be a slight chance that you might get a rougher tenant, for instance, who might cause damage, not pay the bills as much, and have some more headaches in regards to that. You can still do it, but yeah, they of course grow. You're not going to have a $500,000 house go to $1 million if the fundamentals, like you mentioned, are good, and then that stay at $460,000. But again, you don't want to pay the same price for a housing commission one as you do. You want to try to make some money on the way in.
Yeah. I mean, in terms of, there are people that argue that you do get less capital growth in housing commission. I'm still not convinced, and the people that have said that, they've kind of gone a touch quiet on that. So I think maybe it was sort of inconclusive. So I think maybe, but an example of myself, and I bought a couple in closer to, I'm not buying in areas of housing commission littered, but I've sort of, owner occupied, there's a couple of housing commission in the street. And it's known as the rougher part of the area. And subsequently, and I found that out and had that discussion and knew that, but it grew 40 to 50% over an 18-month period. And that still saw capital growth, even though there was more housing commission concentration in the particular pocket versus other. And sometimes you might even argue that it's because it's more affordable. If you're timing, not that we try and time the market perfectly, maybe you might get more capital growth because it's affordable and younger families. So you can't bank on gentrification, but at some stage, if it's affordable enough versus other pockets of an area, younger families might just say, I'll start to move in, but you can't bank on that. That's going to happen when it happens.
It depends, Jeff, because if the adjoining suburbs are what you call blue chip, I hate that word, but let's say got better permit, it's again unlikely that there's going to be $1 million suburb next to a $500,000 suburb. There's some form of ripple effect going to go on. But funny enough, if you actually look at the top 30 performing suburbs in, let's say, Sydney in the last 15 years, there's Blacktown, Lidcombe, Strathfield, Granville, Redfern, Mount Druitt, Campbelltown. They're all on the list. So I wouldn't say they were 10 years ago nice suburbs to live in. I grew up out west, so I'm not being just derogatory, right? But they can still have good capital. My best performing asset still today is my Blacktown property, which is very, very low. I bought in a very low socioeconomic part of Blacktown, and it's tripled in value. Funnily enough, selling it, settlements tomorrow. So I've made my tripled money in less than 11 years, 12 years.
Here we go. So repair, I like that. I like those sort of stories, and these are, I suppose, anecdotes. So you have to make your own judgment calls on whether you're comfortable and the repairs and maintenance. But negotiating repairs and maintenance, they often overlook. Like, talk to us more about this slide, Az.
So again, this is the mistake with this is, I think, to begin with, not factoring in that you're going to have repairs and maintenance. And I certainly didn't factor it in. And the simple analogy I would use, it's like having a car. It doesn't matter if you're getting a brand new car out from the dealership, or if it's a demo car, or if it's a couple of years old, or if it's a really old car, 20 years plus. It will have repairs and maintenance. It's just a simple case of the older car is going to have more repairs and maintenance now. But guess what? If you hold on to that brand new car, over time, it will also have repairs and maintenance. And the same thing goes for property investing. So you need to be factoring in that in. Personally, if it's a fairly well-maintained property that's anywhere from, say, 10 to 25 years, I'm using very, very loose timeframes here, but if it's a property that's 10 years old all the way through to 25 years old, having anywhere from $2,000 to $4,000 a year set aside for repairs is reasonable, or it has been for me. And a great example was last year. One of the properties that I've got in Queensland, it's actually less than 20 years old. I think it's 19 years old. And I just got a call from the property manager to say, hey, the hot water system's gone bust. Warranty's out, costed $1,800, right? That was just that on its own. So these things just happen. And if you haven't factored in, that's probably the biggest mistake. But on the way in, when you're actually looking to put an offer on a property and when you're looking to purchase it, I don't see a lot of people spending enough time and effort on the building and pest inspection. I mean, it's not just something you're paying for $500 or $600 or $700. There's insights in that document, and it's up to you or your buyer's agent or someone who you can trust to help you to understand, where are the golden nuggets in there that you can help to negotiate to either get the vendor to actually make those repairs and maintenance before settlement, or to negotiate the price off that. And the other thing as well too is actioning recommendations from routine inspections. Again, it's not just something you're paying your property manager to do, to go out there to the property every 3 to 4 months just to take photos, send a document in a PDF and email it to you. That's your opportunity to look at it and go, okay, where are the opportunities? What can I actually go ahead and start to work with my property manager? Don't just wait for your property manager to come to you with the recommendations. Be proactive. And lastly, differentiating between urgent and important. And Jeff, that probably goes back to what you're saying at the start about having a multi-million-dollar portfolio. When you've got multiple properties, you'll eventually get to a point where you have many of your property managers come out and reach out to you and say, hey, we've got this issue with this property, we've got that issue with that property. Then you're going to have to be in a position to prioritize and say, okay, which of these are urgent and which of these are important? Because again, that I didn't really experience that earlier on when I started, but now I do, where I have to sit back and go, okay, yeah, I could get it all sorted in this month, but I'll be bleeding red if I do it all at once. So which one is urgent and which one's important?
Not bleeding blue tonight. But anyway, not red, none of this red stuff. What I wanted to say, and Steve was about to give us some absolute gold nuggets, so I'm sorry, Steve. But what I wanted to, I think you said it throughout that, was trusting buyers agents. I mean, I just wanted to pull that thread a little bit, just because maybe Steve's on the. What are your thoughts on the influence of buyers agents and trusting that? And of course, you can be honest. Steve won't be too offended because he's in commercial anyway. So, and resi. But what are your thoughts? Do you trust buyers agents?
Do I trust buyers agents?
Yeah, you can.
I'll jump in firstly. I don't trust buyers agents, nor do I think anyone should trust a buyer's agent. Like they're doing it for a commission. They make money out of getting to a property. Your job is you might use them for a service, but to analyze every piece of information they've collated for you and then see if it's reasonable. That's the hard part, which, as kind of mentioned at the start of the podcast, is getting educated is the hardest part, and that's very hard early on to actually be able to actually analyze that information without having the wool pulled over your eyes. But as I'll get your answer, you can go on, lay the axe into the buyer's agents.
I don't trust buyer's agents. I think there'd be a very minority that I would trust, but for the average Joe Blow, it'd be easy to trust them, because when you don't know what you don't know, and then you've got buyer's agents who can confidently and eloquently put forward the reasons why you should be purchasing a property, it's very easy, because you've got on one end a buyer's agent who's very confident or is coming across very confident, and then you've got an investor or an aspiring investor who hasn't got a clue about property investing. That's a recipe for getting commissions for a buyer's agent. It's right up their alley. So no, I personally don't. But that's not to say there aren't good buyer's agents out there. There definitely are. But it's to get a buyer's agent who can have all the right soft skills and also the technical hard skills, I think it's very rare. There's a lot to be able to do it really well.
You know what's funny? Like when I first started being a buyer's agent, I thought presenting all the technical data was the way to build people's trust. And I actually found it just scared people because I was giving them too much data. I was giving them 3 or 4 pages of data, and they're just kind of like, this seems too risky. It's showing me like what happens when interest rates go up, what happens with this. Because any property you can actually present with positives. You can present an off the plan with positives. I can see in the questions people asking like, do regional towns grow more? Do housing commission grow? I can present positives for all those. Yeah. It's very hard, and you're probably not going to get a buyer's agent who actually presents the negatives as well, because if you are selling to a first-time investor, that's just going to scare them off. And weirdly, when I am presenting deals to a client, you have to sell the dream a little bit. You have to like build a little bit of excitement. Otherwise, people don't actually pull the trigger, which is probably the hardest part starting on. So it's this weird double-edged sword where too much data overwhelms them. Not enough doesn't build confidence. And like you said, they need the soft skills thing, which generally means they don't have the hard skills. So it's this weird to and fro that I don't know what the right answer is and how to do it. But yeah, they're going to make a commission either way. So you've got to choose the person that you're actually going to use to do the work.
Yeah, there we go. Some hard-hitting I was going to say journalism, but on that, you said that question, and we'll throw to ad. And I want to learn more about how you built that, the things that you've done well to build that multi-million-dollar portfolio. But this dovetails into my sort of spicy point about, can you buy property for under 500K anymore, or is there anywhere worth buying? I mean, I'm not going to get you guys to tell, unless you can tell suburbs if you want to. I haven't done enough research to say that there is. But do regional towns outperform capital cities? What are you guys' thoughts? And second question is 500K and under. Is there still some value in locations that you think? Or do you think you have to be over 500K?
I haven't done any research recently to say if there probably is. I wouldn't say, look, there's thousands of suburbs out there. Surely there would be, but I think since COVID, I think that is diminishing. The amount of good opportunities that it's just getting smaller and smaller. So yeah, I would dare say that there would still be. I think Steve, you would know because you look at this and live and breathe it. But I think yes, there is. Is it the same as what it used to be many years ago? No.
Yeah. What do you think about the regional versus? Because I can present you a nice rosy picture that I probably, if you can afford the capital city, you might be better off. I'm sort of horses for courses, because regional has considerably outperformed over the last 3 to 5 years. It's starting to even up a lot more now, and I would say capital cities are starting to take the lead a little bit. So you can present either path. But what are your thoughts on all this, Steve?
All right. So the first part is, does it outperform over what time frame? Because you can always, and the person who said this, Matt Jolich from Hashtag, actually said this quite eloquently. He actually says it's got to do with confidence of capital growth. So you can make a lot more in a short term in a good kind of regional area, but the confidence over long term is hard because there's less data to back it up. Simon Presley, actually, I'm don't want to plug other buyers agents, but he presents some good data for regional town capital growth over capital cities. And on average, you'll actually find the regional towns actually outperform the capital cities. However, choosing the right regional town is a lot harder because, similar to what Matt said, you don't have that confidence. There might have been a period for 10 years of no capital growth as opposed to a steadier one. So choosing it's harder because you're choosing generally a regional town is generally just a town that's smaller in size and has less diverse industries. So you start going like Townsville was the flavor of the last few years kind of thing. That doesn't have 50 industries. It's got military, it's got hospitality, it's got tourism.
University, Steve, it's all university. You got the big stadium out there, 30,000 seater that I thought was 50,000.
Yeah. And you've got mining. So some good fundamentals, but there's only 4. Like there's not like 10 industries. It's not like you go to Adelaide where they've got engineering and they got accounting and they got finance, blah, 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 blah. So if one of those industries falls over, if the government goes, oh yeah, we're going to remove the military base from there, there's 10,000 jobs disappear, 10,000 houses become vacant. Like that's the risk reverse for all in the confidence rating. So yes, you can get it. To answer the question, you can still buy sub 500, but you're looking in like the smaller capital cities, or even Geelong. If you're happy with a fibro house, you can get stuff in Geelong at the moment.
Yeah, I was actually that was my. I'm not. Yeah, the data in Geelong's looking sort of. I hear that it's starting to turn, and there's getting a lot more interest, probably because all the buyers are buying there, and investors as well. There is some regional parts of Victoria. You need to be a little bit careful of those because some of the populations there concern me. Like I'm starting to see, and Jeremy sort of talked about the Grampian sort of area out that way. Horsham. I'm not saying Horsham, but that's just one of the towns that's getting floated. I don't own out there. But that's, and people are starting to mention these because they are affordable. The yield's a little bit better, but just really understand the fundamentals behind that as well, because you might see a bit of a sugar hit. But it's then, okay, you really, I liked some regionals and I did like Townsville. I don't like it so much now, even though we still own there. But anyway, I'm getting some heat in Facebook Messenger. People are saying me that they love regional, so I'm pretty agnostic to regional or capital city as long as there's some fundamentals or affordability driving it. But anyway, sorry, I've sort of banged on a little bit. But what I wanted to say, let's throw to the only sponsor. Well, we do have two sponsors, but you're our main sponsor, Steve. You're the one that we love, and it's taking us to take action. So we'll get to you, and then let's get back to how you built that multi-million, the things you're doing right, and things you see investors can do. So stay tuned, everybody. This is too quick, so you can't go, people. You have to stay. Now I have to actually play it. Where is it? That's awkward. Oh, here we go.
Oh, Jeff, I wish there was 3 investing books that covered everything property.
Oh, Joe, there is. Steve has 3 books now.
That I do, guys. I've got 3 books now. You probably don't even have to follow this group anymore. Just kidding. You want to keep seeing and hearing from me, of course, so stay involved. But in all seriousness, if you want to get the full picture of investing, residential, commercial, and development, these 3 books have you covered for the fundamentals. For OzProp members, here's the best part. I'm giving these books to you for free. Just cover the postage and I'll send them right to your door. Go to policeyproperty.com or click the link below and get your copies today. You can also get all my spreadsheets, checklists, and resources free on my website. Happy reading, gang.
Here we go. He's back. So let's see. Let's talk to we've talked to the negatives, and I think there's probably more negatives, but let's go to some positives. How are we building that portfolio?
Aren't they all negatives?
Yeah, why are we still buying property? Consistent planning is required. Is that a negative or is that a positive? Like overlooked. Okay,
As is about to explain it to us, Jeff.
More of a negative.
Well, look, I think it's both ways, right? Planning is by far one of the key ingredients to be successful in the short and long term in property investing. And at the flip side, a lot of people don't spend enough time to do the planning, and planning has, there's a lot involved in that there. But the ones that I see that are overlooked, that I have also my personally done overlooked in the past, is the first one, tax preparation. Let's be honest, if you're not really a person who enjoys accounting, you're not really into your numbers, and you find the whole thing a little bit too difficult to understand with the legislation and what you can and can't claim, it's a lot to absorb. If you've got 1 property, 2 properties, maybe even 3, it's okay. But irrespective of how many you have, you got to start thinking about it as a 365-day thing rather than thinking about it at tax time when as an afterthought. And an example that I would share is, I actually experienced this a couple of years ago. For whatever reason, it happened to be the case. I had a lot of different expenses that came through across a few of the different properties. Now, I didn't know at the time that they're not all going to be expensed and categorized the same. Some of them are going to be expenses which will be deducted in that financial year, and some were actually going to be depreciated, which then required us to go back to the quantity surveyor and update the report. So there's a lot of work involved there. But if you're starting to think about these things as you go, you will then know what you need to do rather than having to be reactive as a knee-jerk because your accountant said you got to do this or you got to do that. Reviewing the monthly statements. So these are your rental statements that are coming through from your property managers, checking those, initiating rent reviews and appraisals. I don't care from my experience how great the property manager is or how great the agency is. You got to remember you've just got 1 property with that agency. That particular property manager might be looking after anywhere from say 100 100 properties all the way through to 200 properties in their specific rent roll. So you need to be on the forefront and actually initiate those conversations and kickstart the planning process from their perspective. Looking at repairs and maintenance proactively, like I said earlier as well too. And lastly, following up on pending actions with property manager. And I actually got a funny story about this, that I had a property manager once who needed to get a couple of pieces of work done, and I was really gung-ho to make sure it gets done. So I was on top of him. So every week I would give him a buzz and say, hey, where are we at with this? And the last time that I had to do that with them, I said, how long is it going to take? What's the ETA on this? And she said to me, because I know you're on my case about this, I'm going to make sure I get it done by the end of the week. Now, what she didn't realize that she was telling me by saying that is she knows because I'm on top of it, she needs to be on top of it. Whereas if you just let it go, then, I may have one particular item that needs to be sorted on a particular property, but guess what? They're managing 100 plus properties. So you're not the only property that they've got on their mind. So you got to be planning. You got to get ahead of it. You got to spend that time. It's just like running a business, right? You can't treat it anything else but that.
I've actually got a similar story where I wasn't. I'd probably 5 or 6 properties at the time, and I was selling one in Foster, which is on the North Coast. And basically, when the tenant was going to leave, I was like, cool, let's do these repairs. We're changing the floorboards. We're going to paint, blah, 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 just to freshen up for the sale. And got to settlement, the tenant leaving. Tenant left, and then I called them and said, oh, cool, when are the tradies come? She's like, oh, cool, I'll organize that now. And I'm like, you knew when they were leaving. Why didn't you organize it like the day after? And then I had to wait about 7 weeks to get all the tradies through and do it, which is 7 weeks of no rent. So that just me being a little bit lazy cost me about $4,000 worth of rent and expenses coming in, and then delayed obviously the sale as well, where she theoretically could have lined them up the day after they moved out and had bang, 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 and did them all thing. And that was because I actually wasn't on the case. But you've made the good point is one of my good friends, actually, Andrew Morello, he won the Australian TV show, Apprentice TV show. He said to me when I think I had about 5 properties, he said, Steve, you are in the business now of owning property. Like, you treat this like a business. You do weekly, monthly reviews of your statements, where you're at, what proactively you can do, etc., and treat it like an actual business. And that's when I got serious about it. At the start, when you got 1 or 2 properties, you don't know. You're just literally buying stuff and being reactive. But as you get a few, treat it like a business because it is. It's something that probably makes you more money than your actual job to focus on.
And no one cares as much about managing that asset that is worth hundreds of thousands. Maybe for some people, the portfolio is worth millions of dollars now. So no one cares much about that as you, which I sort of, and I'm a fairly nice sort of person. I like to think I am. Maybe I'm not. Self-proclaimed. But yeah, in my first property, I realized that the property was coming up and the tenants were giving notice, and there wasn't enough proactivity. And it made me feel uncomfortable because I was like, these people, the property manager at the time, they weren't sort of on the case, similar to your story, Steve. And then the property went vacant. And I said, well, okay, why didn't we? This needs to be planned. We knew this was happening. It hasn't happened. So, and that sort of woke me up. And I thought, okay, well, now I need to actually just be a bit uncomfortable about having that tough conversation, and just keep on following up. As you said, treat it like a business. So, following those pending actions. So, What have we got next? We've got you have to change your team. Gee, this is another uncomfortable thing.
Right, quick question, Jeff, by Emily. She was right. On that note, is it the PM's responsibility to arrange trades for renovations?
Ooh.
Yeah, generally it is. If it's typically your general repairs and maintenance, absolutely. Renovations as well, yes. Sometimes, depending on the type of work, you can actually have someone dedicated, like a renovation specialist or whatever they're called, who can be dedicated to that. But by and large, yes, your property manager would be the one doing that. I mean, if you're going to be going off and doing it yourself, I'd be questioning, well, what's the purpose of paying them a monthly management fee if that's not part of the job? So yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. I always treat property manager, I don't want to be like, there are some really good ones, but to be honest, most of them are bad ones. For me, they're basically the implementers and the responders. So they're almost like a PA. When there's an issue, they transfer it on to you. It's rare that you get one, especially if you've got like a little 300 grand property, that they're going to have an issue, come back to you with 3 quotes, being like, hey, I've already got 3 quotes for you, blah, blah, blah. Like they're effectively an assistant that can help you, especially if you've been a boardless investor.
Yeah. I found sorry, as you go, mate.
No, I was just going to say that just on this note here about changing your team, I just kind of literally just had a thought just came to my mind now. It's very it's no different to life, right? So as time goes on, your circle of friends, family, relatives, people you work with, they're going to change, right? And I'm sure you boys could agree with that. The people who you used to hang around with years ago are not the same people you hang around now. And property investing is no different as well too, particularly if you're going to be in for the long term and you want to build a portfolio and scale that, you're going to have to change your team. And it's going to happen for one of two reasons. One, the team is going to change because the professionals are changing for reasons that are out of your control. Like, for instance, they're moving on to a different job, they're moving careers, they're changing industries, they're getting a promotion, or they're moving to another competitor, whatever. Or the second is you proactively decide, wait a minute, I'm not happy with Steve's performance as a buyer's agent. I'm actually going to go and find someone else. So they're the two reasons why the change will happen. But either way, it will happen whether you like it or not, whether it's initiated by you or not. But I think the traps that people fall into this is what's on the slide here about, communicating your expectations, not addressing things earlier on, being afraid to hold them accountable because they're the professionals, quote unquote, right? You're afraid of what they're going to say if you actually give them feedback or you share them, how you're finding their performance. But something else as well too, which I've experienced, is sometimes it's just hard to then spend the time and shop around and find someone else, because there's also a fear of, oh, wait a minute, I had a really shitty experience with Steve. But what if the next buyer's agent is also going to have the same experience? Is it better to the devil that you know or the devil that you don't know? So it can be cumbersome to actually go through that process. And in the last purchase that I did, I think within the space of the first month, I decided to change property managers. Supposedly, this property manager was a senior property manager with 25 years of experience. But to me, from what I was seeing earlier on, the pink flags, I was seeing, it was very clear to me that this individual, isn't even ready to be an intern, because there's so many flaws in what they're doing. And because I had built up at that experience by that time, I didn't have any time to actually entertain that anymore. So I immediately said to the agency, either you find me someone who's going to meet my expectations, or I'm going to go find another agency. So they found me someone else within the agency, and it was great. So that's an example where I initiated it, but over the years, I've lost track of how many times people have come and gone because of different reasons, or I've initiated a change with my broker or my accountant as well too. So you're going to have to change whether you like it or not, but it is important if you want to achieve your goals. And one last thing I'll mention too, sometimes the skill set may not be there. So if you want someone for one property, they may have the skill set for that. But if you want 6 properties or 8 properties, does your mortgage broker have the skill set for that? Does your accountant have the skill set for that? Maybe not. That might be another reason why a trigger might need to change as well for you.
You've spot on. So literally, I was going to say that most of the time you outgrow sometimes the expert that you have. So i.e. the accountant, the property manager, even at the start, you sometimes try to find the bargain. You try to get the cheap one because that's all you can afford. The mortgage broker, you can outgrow that. The buyer's agent as well. And thanks for the subtle dig, but you're actually spot on. I actually quite often get, especially in the early years, I quite often got people coming to me being like, I was happy with my buyer's agent, but they just got too big and I became a number, and they just became like a churn and burn company. And then they came, and I'll be honest, I think the best size buyer's agency is like a little 5 to 7 company where it's still owners are actively involved in that. But when they become the ones that are doing 50, 60 deals a month, you're just a cog in the system. And that's the hard part there. So yeah, you either outgrow them or the business outgrows you. And I see that actually. So I personally change property manager every 2 or 3 years on my residential. Well, not anymore, but previously when I had the big portfolio. But purposely, because you'll actually find if they're a good property manager, what do good businesses do? They grow. Yeah. So they start getting more and more clients. And even I've had the same with, like, I was recommending to property managers, and because we were doing kind of like 100 a year or whatever it may be, all of a sudden that's a property manager's whole book. So previously where you're dealing with the manager of the business and they were hands-on, they go, oh, this is too much for me. They hire a 20-year-old or 18-year-old person who they hand it over to them. And now all of a sudden you've gone from the expert to the person with no experience, which is exactly what you said, Az. You got the clueless person, and you start dealing with them and you go, well, why am I paying for this 18-year-old? Let's go find. So I was constantly moving property managers as well.
Yeah, there we go. I was going to say shots fired and better the devil you know. So Steve Polizzi is a devil apparently. The devil in disguise. No. I was thinking of Kylie Minogue the whole. Anyway, I won't sing that live. I mean, I do sing live very regularly. I love the feedback we're getting, and there's so much engagement. I love that we have these kind of conversations because this is what the information we want to get out here. It may not be as sexy, but I think it's super valuable and important and knowledgeable. So Rebecca has said, wish I'd heard this podcast years ago. Literally we had a PM say we can't organize simple maintenance because it's just hard. And I thought that must be an unreasonable request from us. No, I don't think it's unreasonable to get a sort of maintenance, a sort of simple maintenance request. I think that's vital that you should be doing that to keep...
Even if it's complicated, Jeff. I had one where I had a pipe burst under my front lawn, and the property managers came to me and said, "Oh, what do you want me to do about it?" And I go, "Aren't you the property manager? Shouldn't you be telling me what I'm supposed to be doing about it?" Like, it's literally your job title.
Yeah. Should you be paying me for this? But before we go on to the next point, I want to get both your opinions on this because you've bought. I mean, I got views as well, but I've got views on everything. Buying a property at a good price that needs $1,000 of electrical work, still subject to building and pest. Should I try and ask for these to be rectified? The property isn't compliant with the Vic rental standards. What do you think, Az, first, and then we'll go to Steve.
So this kind of this is at a very micro level of overpaying. For a property we're talking about, it's okay sometimes to let the emotions take over and say, yep, that's fine, whatever, forget about it, I'm just still going to go ahead with it. But it needs to be backed by logic. So that logic needs to be, is it the right suburb, provided it's in the right location, it's a strong property, then yeah, I mean, what the heck is $1,000 in the long term? If the property is going to go up in value, before you know it, you'll get your return on investment. Should you negotiate? Yeah, absolutely. Of course, you should still be looking to get a bargain for it. And look, what you're trying to bargain isn't something you're trying to make it up. There's legitimately something that needs to be rectified. So yeah, by all means, go for it. But again, I'd just be a little bit cautious when you're looking at a hot market, because sometimes even something as small as that, they won't really care about this sort of stuff, and they say, nah, if you take it or leave it. So just take into consideration that if it's ticking all the boxes, absolutely. But don't sweat it too much if you can't get it over the line.
My first reaction, guys, when I read that comment was, did that $1,000 come from the real estate agent? If not, don't trust it. You can barely do anything with $1,000 now. I replaced a couple light switches and a fan, and it was close to $1,000. So I'd be confirming. But like I said, if it is only $1,000 in the grand scheme of things, that's absolutely nothing. Like, you should not be walking away from a deal for $1,000. But my advice is go get that $1,000 verified. Get a couple quotes, because today's day and age, you cannot do anything plumbing, electrical wise for less than $1,000.
Yeah. The other thing to be mindful of, and I'm not a contract specialist, and we bought a few in Victoria, but I haven't come across this necessarily, because building and pest, particularly contract, it has to be structural. So that may not be considered to exit the contract. So just chat to your representatives and make sure that, I mean, yeah, sure, negotiate, but then a lot of real estate agents, particularly in Melbourne, they've been through a couple of cycles. This is not, so they'll sort of know. They'll just be able to call your bluff. Not saying don't negotiate it, but just be mindful that you might get a bit of, oh, okay, well, it's not structural. We know it's not structural. Yeah, take it or leave it kind of thing. But yeah, just know where you stand from that before you or your representative goes in and has that conversation, Kirsty.
As I was mentioned anyway, you're going to be spending $2,000 or $3,000 a year in maintenance. So it's just part of it. The good thing is they're aware of it beforehand. So the stuff is not the scary stuff. It's the stuff you don't know that's the scary. Exactly.
And usually when you take over, particularly if it's been owner occupied, it'll probably have some warts, unless it's typically a couple who's been in there for 30, 40 years, they'll have maintained it. But anyway, yeah, Christy said, thanks for answering. Changing a team, like it's a difficult thing though, because you've often built relationship with these people and it feels like you're sort of almost breaking up with somebody, but have you how do you handle these kind of situations? Do you do it diplomatically?
I literally it just happened today. So I went through a process over the last couple of months to restructure my lending portfolio. And literally today, I had the previous broker message me and say, hey, just want to check, did you refinance your loans? And so I looked at it and I just responded, yep, absolutely. This is the reason why. And yeah, for a split second, I still felt a little bit shit because I was like, well, this person really helped me at that time. And mind you, for someone who may be starting out, this broker, great. But for me and for Ronnie right now, they're not what I need because they don't have the skill set for what I want to do next. And the time that I need a broker to spend with me to map out what, not just the next property purchase, but the future one. So it was just a quick self-talk that I had to have myself before I respond back to that text message saying, there's a reason why I did this, back your decision and move forward. So to be honest, a lot of it just needs to be self-talk. Particularly if you've done it intentionally, you just need to remind yourself when it does feel like that, because let's be honest, we all feel like that at times when we're walking away from someone for a particular reason. You just need to remind yourself why you've done it and just rip the band-aid and keep moving forward.
Good answer.
Okay, let's go. I could talk about the team because I love team and teamwork, dreamwork. There will be vacant periods. No, properties aren't always. I mean, isn't there going to be 8 months vacancy in commercial the 2 weeks after you buy it? No, it won't be. I'm being melodramatic. I'm sorry, but tell us about vacancy periods.
Look, this is very similar to about changing a team. How I was mentioning it's inevitable. This is also inevitable. It will happen at some point. It's not a matter of if; it's a matter of when it's going to happen. And there's so many different scenarios in which vacancy periods can happen. And some of them that I've put down here is like the first one could be right at the start. You may have purchased a property that's an owner occupier, so you will have to spend a little bit of time with your property manager to get some new tenants fresh in there to begin with. The tenants themselves will actually move out at some point as well. I cannot think of majority of renters across Australia are all renting because they want to. They're all renting because majority of them want to eventually have their own place to live in. So it would be foolish to think that your tenants will stay there forever. Yeah, they may stay there for 5 years, some may 10 years, some may be longer, but eventually they will move. I think it's very, very rare to find renters who intentionally want to rent for their entire life. So I think you need to remember that it's not a matter of if and when. Emergencies and personal situations happen as well. I had a few years ago a lovely lady who was looking after the place like it was her own. She had to pack her bags and leave because her ex-partner found out where she lived and there was an AVO against him. But the minute that she knew that he knew where she was living, which was at our investment property, she was scared for her life for their kids. So she had to pack up and leave. And of course, in that situation, you can't even claim the bond, or at least in my case, the bond couldn't be claimed because of the circumstances. So this stuff happens. And so then now I'm in a position having to then find tenants again. There's poor treatment of the property, or there can be difficult tenants to deal with as well. And the last thing is carrying out strategic renovations, particularly if it's an older property. At some point, you're going to want to do some strategic renovations. And it's just so much more easier. In fact, sometimes it may not even be possible to do it with the tenants in there. And so you will then either wait for the lease to come up for renewal to vacate them, or you may just sort of decide to take them out if the lease has already come to an end and it's periodic. But that is the case there. And look, one of the things, and some of the questions have come through about this too, even in a hot market, let me tell you, even in a hot market, because I purchased quite a few, it still takes time. There's a process that property managers need to go through, advertise the property, get all the inquiries come through, sift them through, put forward to you which ones are actually potential, the good ones, recommend one out of those potentials for you to decide, then get the paperwork ready. And often those tenants are already renting somewhere else. So they're not going to come straight away the next day and start living in your property and paying rent from day dot. So even in the best case, 3 weeks can pass before you know it, before you've actually got rent coming in. That's best case scenario in a hot market. So always be prepared for vacancy periods.
You touched on it as well on the last slide as well or 2 slides ago about the property manager being proactive, and I gave like the Foster story in your one as well. Like you said, they most of the time are following a process. It's like, okay, when the tenant leaves, we're going to go in and then we're going to take some photos and then we're going to put it on realestate.com and then blah, 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 as opposed to trying to show people through prior, because that's actually really annoying for them to actually do, because with the current tenants there who are packing up and stuff, they don't want to actually give notice, being like, oh, can we show people through on Thursday night at 4 p.m? And then they go over there and there's boxes and crap everywhere and all that type of stuff. So like you said, they follow a process. So trying to be proactive is obviously really important in that as well. Yeah, I've bought in areas with like 0.2% vacancy rates and they still go vacant for a couple of weeks.
Yeah. There we go. I think we're sort of we're just over an hour 10, so I think there's definitely going to be. I think that's a vital thing to factor in, and I suppose I'll ask one more question before we move to the cash flow thing, which I think cash flow, and also that'd be interesting to hear how you built that portfolio as well. But how vacant? Some people say it'll be vacant between 2 and 4 weeks a year. How much buffer do you consider that a property be vacant per year? Like to consider as.
Oh, look, I don't try to overcomplicate it. I just simply keep a 4-week window in my mind, because that's what my experience has been. If it's a really good property and good fundamentals, it ticks all the boxes, and you'll definitely get a tenant without any issues. Yes, it can be done more in less time than 4 weeks, particularly like one of the other topics we just spoke about around planning and being proactive and initiating those conversations early with your property manager. Even then, it'll take a few weeks, but just to be conservative, I think 4 weeks should be sufficient.
Yeah. Yep. Okay. Cash flow, and this is where I'd love to pull back the covers as to how you think about building your own portfolio, because so you started at 24, and it probably then sort of took some time to grow given that first. But how did you then sort of go and think about, okay, great, I've got the equity, I'm going to buy, and triggers for the cash flow change is one of them, one of the ways you built it. But how did you actually, I'm going a little bit off the slides here, but that's okay. How did you then sort of think about, how did you keep stacking and building that portfolio up? Was it increasing income or just waiting? What was the process for you?
It was a combination of all of those things as well too. It's a combination of time, because obviously you got to give time as well too to see how your existing properties are performing, to see what value they're at, and extracting the equity out to go again then. So there's definitely time. There's also the increase in salary, which has happened for me, fortunately enough, over the years. But then there's also just your buffers that you need to put in place as well too, because one of the things I didn't really give a lot of attention to. And if you're listening to this or watching this and you're about to start your journey, or you've just started, you have to embrace the fact that you're going to be riding waves here. Your position will change, and you have to be okay with that, particularly if you're clear on your goals and what you need to achieve and how many properties that may look like for you over a set period of time. The cash flow will change. My first property, when I purchased it, its cash flow position was green. It was positively geared. Then when I took equity out of it, then it went into the red. And then over the course of interest rates rising from 22 to 24, it went even more red. Now it's back to neutral, and by the end of the year, it's going to be green. So I've seen it all go through. But if you two things, if you're mentally not strong to deal with that, because some people really struggle with that mentally, about seeing the numbers and them going in the opposite direction to what they think property should be doing. So if you're not mentally strong, and two, you don't have the buffers in place, then property investing may not be for you, or you just need to spend more time really planning it through and being prepared for it. Because honestly, it's not just about the numbers on the paper, it's about what's going on in your head as well too. But I think what can help you to get through that is if you really purchase some good properties. Like I purchased, Steve, I purchased one in Perth as well too. Fantastic, but it was negatively geared when I first purchased it, and that's okay because the interest rates were quite high at the time, still relatively high, but I knew fundamentally that it was heading in the right direction, and that's shifted now for me, that cash flow position. So it will constantly change, and again, it's green now, but because the value's grown so much, if I take equity out, that position is going to change again. So you have to think about the long-term view here, as opposed to the short-term pain which you may be feeling.
Is the answer buy a commercial property, Steve?
No, I was going to say the point is he's basically saying is you want to stress test your portfolio, because you want to be able to see, can you weather the storms and can you ride the good times as well? And that's about. But even like one of the points, I'll try to summarize your last 3 slides a little bit. People, when they buy a property, will sometimes be like, oh, it's great, I bought this property, it's got cash flow positive, blah, blah, blah. But they don't take into account all the stuff I just went through. So the common one I get is like boarding houses. People go, oh, I bought this boarding house, it's great, it's 20 grand a year positive. I go, cool, did you take into account the 70% occupancy rate? Like they're doing 100%. Did you
what
take
about the 10% property management fees?
Yeah, that's right, like more, 20%. So then do you take into account the high wear and tear, because it's transient people coming through and then there's multiple bathrooms, blah, 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 blah. And then all of a sudden, like, it's actually neutral, if not negative. But when they bought it, like, it's great, it's 20 grand a year positive. So that's just in that moment in time. You layer that with what Az just said about rising interest rates and things like that. Like, things can turn completely to the opposite direction. Long term, they might be all right. You might still buy it knowing that's going to happen and it's going to come. But like you said, there's waves. Like there's waves throughout property investing. There's also bad luck. I had one point where I think it was 5 or 6 resis, and within a month I had like hot water system go, air conditioner go, plumbing issues. But I had like 10 grand worth of maintenance in a month, and I was like, I've got 2 grand in my account. What am I doing here?
Jeez. That's when you start. That's when you go. I don't know, sing karaoke at the local and hope that somebody.
No, I went back to Dad's Gary Polisi. Can I borrow 5 grand for a month?
Oh yeah. Shout out to the parents. What do I want to say? How much, Marcy? I love the interaction. Keep throwing these questions and comments, team, because this is how a lot of us learn by asking those questions. She asked, "How much do you consider is a safe buffer per property, or how do you calculate buffers for your portfolio?" What do you think about that, Az?
So look, this is a great question. I have a different view of this. Look, textbook answers will tell you to have a buffer in place, for each property for a set period of time. It could be, some people I've seen talk about, 3 months worth of all of your property expenses should be set aside, sometimes 4, 6 months even as well too. But realistically, where on earth are you going to start to put that much money of your expenses aside, particularly if you have multiple properties? One property, sure. Multiple properties, very difficult. So what I do to be practical, I have a look at how old my property is as well too. I take into consideration how much expenses have already been coming out from the prior year as a baseline. And I then have a look and say, okay, well, this property is actually going to be, potentially costing me more. So I'd rather have more buffers in this one. For the other property, it's more new, it's self-sufficient, it's fine. I'm going to worry less about that. So I go based off the property itself and then work out how much buffer I should have, as opposed to doing a blanket rule. Because to be honest, if I was to do a blanket rule, I'd be spending too much time trying to save up buffers in place for my property expenses, as opposed to focusing on the next purchase I need to be going as well too. So yeah, I look at it a bit more realistically rather than having to have equal buffers across all the properties.
That's real talk, man. Yeah.
Risk profile as well is completely different. So like my little example about borrowing some money off Dad, I knew I had bank of mum and dad. Like they're not going to give me 100 grand kind of thing, but I knew I had a place to sleep, food covered if it all went tits up, and probably they would have gave me 5, 10, 15 grand. Elijah just kind of joked about credit card. Funny thing, I didn't ever know how to credit card because it hurt my borrowing capacity. So I didn't even have that option.
Yeah. I haven't had one for 3 or 4 years too. I had to cancel one to get some more borrowing capacity, and I just haven't. I don't really need it.
I'm still yet to have a credit card, Jeff. Never had a credit card.
Never, ever.
No.
Geez, I used to have the Amex, the big limit, which got me the points, and I was like, I'm going to go and fly to Vegas, and anyway. So somebody said, I think this is useful because this question is very useful because Kartik posted about Port Pirie in regional South Australia yesterday. He said, very useful session with lots of insight, but sad to hear there is not many options under 500,000. What will new investors like me do? Wait till eligibility grows. And I suppose what he means probably, and correct me if I'm wrong, is borrowing capacity, Kartik. Is that what you, what do you guys think about that? I've got some views, but yeah.
Yeah, look, I think it's a harsh reality. I don't subscribe to people's responses around this, which is, it's still possible, and you can still start today in 2025 and still build a portfolio like you could years ago. No, this is speculation. So look, I don't have evidence to back this. So I caveat that before I say this. But I think what may end up happening as time goes by is they're still maybe within that range, but not freestanding homes. So I think we might start looking at different property types, particularly like your townhouses and your duplexes, or with less land but still having a property, which might start to be a bit more affordable, as opposed to the traditional freestanding 600 square meter block or even larger. So I think your property type is where we might see a shift and maybe more growth happening if it's not already. But beyond that, longer term, like I'm thinking, talking 10 years plus, I think it's going to be people are going to struggle to really get it. My personal view, I think eventually it'll be an asset class that'll be very hard to get into.
Yeah, geez. What do you think about that, Steve?
I basically stole my answer. Was like, you just change the property, you change the property class that you buy. I couldn't afford to keep buying houses, so I bought townhouses. I bought 2 townhouses in my portfolio. Then I bought an apartment. Like we mentioned, the fundamentals need to be right. But just put in perspective, I bought one in Waterford West, a town house in Logan, 180 grand. What was that like? 7 years ago, sold it 4 months ago for 480 grand. So like you can still do well. And that property's been positively geared from the start because the rents have grown pretty basically in line with interest rates. So you just shift there. And then, like I said, I'm in agreement. So I don't think property like ownership is going to be as easy or even a thing. It's going to be almost like you pass on your rental, but that will also create other markets where townhouses outperform houses and apartments outperform houses. And funny enough, if you look at the data from the last 3 years, most areas in capital cities, apartments have outgrown houses because of that affordability side.
Yeah. What are we going to call ourselves in 10 years? Are we going to be Oz investors and we'll just invest in, I mean, who knows what'll be coming up in 10 years time. We'll still be floating around. Maybe I'll be an AI bot. But there's one or two more sort of mistakes and wisdom pieces that you've got as we'll play our level up property. It's an absolute good one, and then we'll get back to sharing the goal, and then we'll wrap up. So if you have some questions, please put them in now, and we'll get to as many as we can. We'll say Steve said he's cleared his day just for his property. He sent everybody away. Now he's going to answer. We're going to answer as many questions with Az. So drop them in. We'll get to heaps. We're back very soon.
Everywhere you look, someone else is making money in property except for you. Your mate, he just bought a house. It's already gone up $100,000. There's some bloke on Facebook. He's bragging about pulling in a 7% rental yield. Meanwhile, you're stuck scrolling real estate and domain, confused as hell, and having no idea about where to start. Or maybe you're that mate that's got $100,000 in equity. You have a few properties under your belt, but you feel stuck. You're unsure about how to scale without over-leveraging and not knowing what the next right move is. So why does it feel like everyone else has some kind of secret that you're missing out on? It's because they do. There's a reason some people keep stacking properties while others sit on the sidelines stacking excuses. There's a reason why some investors buy under market value while others pay too much. There's a reason why investors know the hot spots before there's any heat. And there's a reason that some people build $150,000 in passive income while others just spend years thinking about it. And it comes down to knowledge. And that's exactly why Jeff Miles and I, Joe Tucker, created the Level Up Property course to hand you the exact step-by-step process that we've used to buy over $100 million worth of property in today's market. We've built Australia's largest property investment community with over 80,000 members, and we help everyday investors secure hundreds of thousands of dollars in equity, all without wasting years of their life trying to figure it out the hard way. Making an uneducated decision on the biggest purchase in your life is just gambling with your future.
Stop it. Get some help.
And this isn't just another how to buy property course. Let's be clear though, this course isn't free. What? And neither should it be. This is our life's work. We've spent over 100 hours each on this course alone. Oh, babe. Okay, video number 3. Number 4 with million does... Done. We've got decades of experience, millions of dollars in deals distilled into a repeatable process that you can take away for yourself. If you're looking for free advice, there's plenty of noise out there. You can go and find that if you'd like. But if you want real, actionable, step-by-step guided process that works in today's market, then this investment is going to change everything for you. By the time that you finish this course, you will have full confidence. You'll have every tool that you need to build an amazing portfolio if you act on it, right? Which is why we have mentoring built in. So we kick you up the butt to make sure that you're kicking your goals. So the real question is, how much longer are you going to watch everyone else making money in property before you jump in and start playing the property game properly? Because the sooner you start, the sooner you start winning.
Oh, we're back. Just got myself a chocolate. Should have let.
Can you give a shout out as well, Jeff? I've actually done the course. It's awesome. So, and obviously part of the private mentoring group as well. So,
yeah, that means a lot coming from Steve. But because he doesn't just give out plaudits or pundits, whatever. Yeah, maybe you need a longer ad. So where are we up to? Areas from property managers. Do you want to? Because I feel like we've unpacked this a lot. I'm just mindful of. I mean, I can probably do a 2-hour session, but I reckon we Okay, it's Steve saying is. But let's talk to liquidity not being, certain expenses will be on your side. I think that'll be a great one, and then sort of wrap with liquidity not being on your side. Because I think, I mean, yeah, if you want to quickly give us a 30-second snapshot of errors made by property manager, I think we've encapsulated that pretty well. As
yeah, look. Long story short, don't trust everything. Again, it's not a matter of if, it's a matter of when a mistake will happen. And the things you can see here where we've got on the slide here, common errors made, I've seen them all happen. So sometimes it's not always to do with the property manager themselves. Sometimes it's the systems that can cause errors. So always double check everything, because there can be errors and you could be leaving money on the table, because that's happened to me in the past. Certain expenses will increase, which is another thing that most investors don't think about. And it's very similar to running a business, like Steve said earlier as well too, that you receive that guidance to treat it like a business. As with any business, you'll have fixed costs and you'll have variable costs, and same with property investing. You've got some that are fixed, and in fact, some of them will only go up with time. Even if you don't have a mortgage on the property, your landlord insurance will probably still be going up with CPI and with the cost of building. If and when that ever happens. Your management fees are going to keep going up with the rent increases going up in proportion as well too. Council rates, water rates, and repairs and maintenance, because your property is getting 1 year older than it was when you first purchased it, right? So certain expenses will actually only go up, and you need to factor that in. Yes, it can be offset with the capital growth. It can be offset by the rental growth, but it's just more about being aware, because I didn't think about this. I didn't have anyone tell me this. My probably responsibility that I didn't actually go out and seek the guidance and the information, but it just would have been good when I first started to go, hey, just be prepared. I know you want to go buy one property, but whether you buy one or you buy 10, you're going to have certain expenses that you will always have, and they may actually keep going up with time as well too. So something to keep in the back of your mind and always be aware of.
There's ones you won't prepare for as well. Like, I've got a property in the Blue Mountains, and it rained for non-stop almost for like 2 years, and the back deck got so wet and soggy that the tenants their foot kept going through it. It kept breaking. So you're just up for a whole new deck, which you looked at the start and it was like sturdy when we inspected it. 5 years later, coming up for something like that. But Jeff, someone asked, James asked a good question about discounts on property management when you've got multiple properties. Have you experienced that, or have you not had any properties in the same location?
Not in the same location, but discount. I mean, you can negotiate fees in general. But look, again, we're talking peanuts here with the stuff that you're trying to negotiate. Like, think about the bigger picture here. The bigger picture is the rental growth and the capital growth. And if you've actually got someone who's actually fairly competent at what they do, then just pay them what they're worth to become. Because like you said, Steve, there are so many out there that are very poor at what they do. A really good one is worth paying for what they are. I mean, ultimately, you're not saving a great deal of money by negotiating it. If you can, yeah, great. But don't do it at the expense of quality service and what they're meant to be doing for you as a
you're kind of cutting off your nose to spite your face, because you might be saving, I don't know, 10, 15, 20 bucks a week, which is not nothing. I don't want to sort of paint that as nothing, but at the same time, if you're then forcing the business owner to say, okay, now they have to manage 120, if imagine you have 10 people asking for discounts, and like, well, okay, we lose it because XYZ company down the road is going to do the same thing, and now we have to manage 120 properties each instead of 100. Is that compromising the quality that you're getting from that company? I suppose will be the thing.
They'll get it back anyway. What people don't realize is property managers will take a clip from their tradies and this and that. So guess what? You're going to get some more expensive trades because they want a bigger clip of that payment.
Oh, spicy. There we go. Lots of great questions coming through. I want to, so we've got some around lending. And Elijah, can we talk to areas mistakes when lending structure or strategy? Equity releases increases your mortgage repayments and decreases cash flow. Well, it depends on where you keep, I suppose, that equity, Elijah. If you're putting into a property, yeah. But then hopefully you're getting the capital growth. But what did you experience with that as that much?
Yeah, look. I would say, lending structure or strategy. Well, firstly, from my perspective, lending and structure are part of your strategy. So that should be at the forefront as well too. And based on that strategy, you should then be implementing the structure and the lending. So I think that is the mistake, really. If I just zoom out and answer the question in a different way, if you don't have the strategy in place, or even, let's not use that term because it's quite overused. If you don't have let's say you don't have a clear plan for the next 12 to 18 months, then you will make a mistake with the lending or the structure. So start with that, because if you get that right, then you'll get the lending and the structure right correctly. And to the thing we already discussed, have the right team around you, because they'll make sure that you don't make those mistakes.
Yeah. It's amazing. You sort of start to think, you have to really think, okay, great, I'm going to buy this next property, or I'm getting the equity out, and I'm going to buy that property. But what about the property after that? Because if you haven't thought about that, if you're then sort of capping out your individual borrowing capacity, you might not be able to go into trust, and then you're caught, and you have to think, then you have to sell something, whereas you may not have needed to if you thought about it a little bit. Steve, you're going to say something. Sorry, man.
I was going to say, Az said it perfectly with about upgrading your team. That's probably the biggest part, of making sure your accountant and mortgage broker know exactly where you're going. And like you mentioned, when you buy number one and you buy on a personal name, and then you might get to number three and you buy under a trust, as you get further and further down the rabbit hole, that gets way more complicated, much more so. So that's where your team needs to upgrade as well.
Yeah. And the other thing that some people fail to take into account is what's going to happen in your life as well. Because yes, you want to buy 18 investment properties in the next 12 minutes, but that's probably not the reality. You're going to, at some stage, want to buy the PPOR. I've seen even the 100+ property investors are buying PPORs these days. And that's good for them. But yeah, at what stage do you want that? When do you want to have kids? And if that's when do you want to get married? Like, what does that sort of all not unravel? But that's where you can kind of have this dream, or you can have this kind of plan in your head. But the reality is, you're not going to be able to execute that plan. So setting your own expectations, or having those conversations with people that are important around you as well. Good. Okay. I was like, before we get to liquidity not being on the side, if you had borrowing capacity of 270, would you purchase the cheap? But I think we've sort of answered this a little bit, Samuel. Would you to purchase another property, or would you wait till your borrowing capacity increases? What do you think about this? Are you patient, or do you just want to go for it?
No, that's kind of like, look, I'm just thinking on the fly. That's like kind of saying, well, look, there's only one person available to date, and yeah, there are 4 out of 10 in terms of the characteristics of one, but I'll just date them because no one else is available to date. I mean, that's the most riskiest thing you could ever do. So just
they're also high maintenance as.
Yeah, exactly. So you'll end up you'll end up doing more harm than good by going off and dating just because that's all that's available in the market. So no, I definitely wouldn't. I think people you need to have a think about, what else you can do. Like, this superannuation is such a gold mine. People don't spend enough time to understand. Same with shares as well too. Yes, you could also look at other opportunities for things that may be of interest to you as other asset classes like gold and crypto and collectibles. If of course you know what you're doing and you're educated, but if you don't have enough there, no, I wouldn't. I would consider. I wouldn't say put money in the bank. That's the worst thing you could do. But just make sure that you consider other asset classes. For me personally, super is great. Think about that. How you could, top up that instead.
Yeah, I think it's the time frame that you can save in is the big in consideration as well. Like, if it's going to take you 3 years to save an extra, 20 grand, you go like exactly what you said, as you need to put it in something that's going to remain at least with the market. So some form of diverse shared portfolio, whatever. Don't put it in the bank because you'll get priced out. And then you weigh that up of it. And then most of the time, it depends where you are in your portfolio. Like I can comfortably buy 250 grand properties and know that I'll get fairly good capital growth and good cash flow. But if I'm a novice investor who's never bought a property before, you will get that wrong. Like, you'll just burn yourself. You'll go out and buy in a really regional mining town and buy a dud.
No, Liza. No. But what I was going to say on that, Samuel, is if it is that you're going to hold off, just be really clear what steps. And if the person you're speaking to, if it's a bank, please probably go and speak to a broker or go and speak to a different bank. But go and understand what steps you need to take. Because if a person can't, if they're just saying, oh, you need to earn more money, it's like, well, okay, what be more specific with that lending sort of plan. So you can say, okay, great, I'm on 80K at the moment. If it goes up to 100K, then I can buy for 500. So you've got some clear actionable items. If it's just, okay, need to earn more money, or borrowing capacity needs to go up. Okay, well, what steps do I need to put in place? Or is it recasting some loan terms? There's some many different levers you can pull around that. So if that's not the type of conversations that are being had, maybe reconsider the professional.
Also, what's the limiting factor? Is it your capital or your servicing, which I think you're alluding to, and find out that, because once you've got a goal, people can reach a goal. If you were saying like, Steve, your daughter's going to die in a year if you don't get to this, like, you make stuff happen when you've got a goal. Like, so no, you know what I mean? Like, I saw it on Instagram. That's the reason I saw it on Instagram. Someone was like, do you think you could make $1 million in 1 year? And everyone was like, no. And what do you think the chances of you making $1 million in 1 year? And everyone's like, 1%. Cool. If I was going to murder your family in a year's time, do you think you could make $1 million? And everyone's hand went up. So like having a goal, like, and I know it's dramatized for Instagram, but you'd be surprised what you can achieve. And the same thing happens with buyer's agent goals, portfolio size, and that's where goals come in. My goal was 50 grand passive income, and I got a second job, did all the savings, did all the renos myself. Then it was 100K. You do it be based on the goal. If you're just floundering, you're not going to get anywhere.
Yeah. Excellent. Liquidity is not on your side. Why is it not on your side?
Well, look, I think this is less of a mistake, but more something that people don't keep at the forefront of their mind. So essentially, the reflection that I've had over time is if you ever have any doubt in your mind that you ever may need access to cash, then having to get it out of your property investment and having to sell it is not the way to go, because it'll take, if you need money now, you're not going to get that money straight away. So that's the key takeaway with this. One of the ones that I found quite interesting is, the time it can take will really be dependent on a number of factors. And one of them that I find quite interesting is pricing expectations. And Steve, you might be able to write this because you're a bit more closer to the sort of the Sydney city area. And Jeff, you might be aware of the suburb called Belmore. Now, I'm aware of somebody who, from our social group, who have a property in Belmore. Belmore's a good area if anyone who's listening in Sydney. But the property was really, really run down. Now, they should have been able to get about 1.4 mil for the house and for its property configuration location. But because it was just really run down and they didn't look after it, it was only going to go for about 1.2. So, but this person was gung-ho that no, and adamant that it had to go for what was at the market, 1.4. They went to auction, didn't even get to reserve price. So it only until this person went through that process did they realize, oh shit, I'm actually not going to get what my expectation is. Meanwhile, they need the money, and they've got people that they need to pay off. But that's not going to happen now anytime sooner, because your expectations weren't aligned with the market and what the sales agent was telling you. Eventually, it did sell for 1.2, but that's an example out of many different reasons why the time it can take to sell a property can be dependent on these things, and pricing expectations is one.
Well, one of the points that I always get is people sugarcoat the numbers a little bit. So they have this property they bought for 500K in, let's say, Perth. They go, oh, it's great, it's worth 600K now. I've made 100,000. I'm like, well, no, you haven't, because you paid stamp duty on that property. Property's negatively geared 10 grand a year, so we're already up to like 35 grand. If you sell the property, you're going to pay an agent 15 grand or so. So now we're getting closer to 50 grand. The property we replace it with, you're going to pay stamp duty again. Then you're going to pay tax on it. So you've actually only made about 25, 30 grand. So on paper, when you're spruiking it, being like, oh, I've got 100 grand. No, you haven't. And that's exactly the point. Liquidity is not necessarily on the side. There's other expenses and there's other taxes, and it's not quick. It's not like shares. You can click a button and sell it. It's this long drawn out process.
Yeah. That's it's an uncomfortable truth about taxes and all those extra things in there as well. Finance and settlement timeframes, property appeal and condition, the process. It's many things that people don't factor in. Kartik's come back again. He said, "What's your view on apartments?" Well, depends on where, because there's not one apartment market. And he said, "Does it have any decent capital growth?" Well, if you look at Lakemba, I mean, I'm not saying buy Lakemba, but you probably know this quite well, or you might have seen it. You sort of because the significant gap between apartments versus houses in Lakemba, you need to be really careful though, because there'd be some older ones that would so you need to dig deeper a lot further. So there's risk of apartments. But he says, have seen many apartments in Melbourne depreciated in value. Well, that's supply and demand. Wherever you're buying, you need to consider what's going on, like how much, like if there's new properties, new apartments being sold for 500 and there's existing ones being sold for 470, 480, why is anybody buying that old one for anything more than that 500 sort of plus mark? If you can buy that brand new one for roughly the same price, and yeah, it might have a couple of cracks in it anyway, the way that the quality these days. But what are you guys' thoughts on, I mean, I suppose we're not intimate experts on Melbourne apartments, but do you guys have any views on that?
I'm happy to go on a rant, but I'll let Az go first before I steal the show.
Well, I mean, look. It's Steve's example is great as it is, right? Blacktown. Look, and you're selling it for triple of what you purchased it for. So that's a prime example that it can work. I think apartments are great. It really just comes down again to the fundamentals. The fundamentals need to be there in order for it to do well. So as long as the suburbs are stacking up, we're not talking like high rise, 20-story plus apartments. Then I think that there can be some merit for it as well too. But it's all contextual as well too. Like if you're in a position where you can't afford to get a townhouse, a duplex, or a freestanding house, and the suburb factors fairly stack up fairly well, and it's not a high-rise apartment, then yeah, maybe it is worthwhile to consider it. It's always, ideally nothing beats land, but that's not to say that may not be the case. So it is something to consider. And as time goes on, it'll probably be even more to consider. I know the other questions earlier was about, what is the real estate market mean in the future, and prices as well too. Apartments may actually end up being an ideal thing down the track as well too. But they're my thoughts on it. I think there's two sides to the coin.
Yeah, with my rant, so this is similar to commercial where people just tarnish all of commercial with a brush, being like, don't buy a commercial, they're high vacancy rates. People do the same thing with apartments. They go, should I buy an apartment? Depends what you're buying and where. So a lot of the times when they say this statement, they're talking off the plan. And we know off the plan apartments don't perform well. You're overpaying, there's builder margins, there's selling agent margins, there's buyer's agent margins. 3 years old, in 3 years' time, no one cares if it's 3 years old or 6 years old, so you're better off buying the older one. Then they also tarnish it with Melbourne. You've just mentioned it, exactly, perfect. They start talking about high density areas, so where there's 20-story, which then alludes to oversupply issues, which is what Melbourne has, hence why you can buy a cheap apartment. Completely different to buying an apartment in a medium density area where there's a 3-story limit. And then you still get the scarcity factor because you get a land component, then it's impossible to oversupply. The risk with apartments is it's easy to oversupply because you can keep building up. But if there's no zoning changes, it's low or medium density, and you've looked at town planning and they're not building any more of them, you can still do really well because you've got that scarcity factor. The same issue goes for houses. You go buy it in Greenfield out in Sydney's West where they're building 200 new houses. That's an oversupply. It's got the same issue, even though you're getting the land component. So,
but it's near the airport, Steve. It's near the airport, though. Yeah,
exactly right. So the devil's always going to be in the detail. You got to look at the data, what the future's going on in the area, the affordability, the vacancy rates of that type of asset. Like you still got to do the exact same work. The same as you don't buy a high density off the plan house or a new estate, et cetera, et cetera. So you can still do really well. As I mentioned before, funnily enough, most suburbs, apartments have outperformed the houses in Sydney in the last 2 to 3 years.
Yeah, there we go. We're sort of going to Q&A a little bit now. We could wrap it up in a nice bow after this question, because I think this is going to be a question that a lot of people will be asking themselves. And Emily, I love the engagement. She said, for a first-time investor, would you stick to a local property so you can keep an eye on it, or take the risk of interstate? What are your thoughts? As I've got some very well-developed thoughts on this. But
yeah, well, look, yeah, when I purchased the first property, which is 20 minutes away from where I lived, which is actually close to Parramatta. It honestly, I can't even remember the last time I actually ever thought about it. Life gets in the way so much. You've got so many other priorities. You as much as you think that you'll be able to go and keep an eye on it and look at the property, that's not going to happen. And plus, you can't just go willy-nilly and just rock up and check out the property. There's a lot of issues with doing that. So firstly, you won't have the time, and two, you can't just go off and start to check out the investment property for privacy reasons and whatnot. The other part of the question is then, is that interstate? Is there risk? Look, I think there is a risk to purchase anyway if you don't know what you're doing. So it doesn't matter what state it is, what region it is, what property it is, what location it is. If you don't know what you're doing, there will be risk. It doesn't matter. In that case, you may as well buy in your own backyard as opposed to interstate. The risk is still the same because you don't know what you're doing. So I think less about the fact whether it's interstate or local, and just think about, are you attuned enough to know how to identify the right suburb, location, and property? If you are, then it doesn't matter where the property is, and your risk is really minimized. And if you don't know, then that's where you need to get the assistance of someone to help you.
Yeah, we'll just keep asking questions. What are your thoughts on that, Steve? Oh, he's muted himself.
I've got my little babies turned in the room, was yelling, so I muted myself. Yeah, it's the thing is, when people live in an area, they think they know it. And I did the same thing as you. As I bought in Blacktown in Western Sydney, and I knew where the train stop was and the bus stops and the type of people that were there. None of that is investing data. So this should have been doing the same work as you were doing interstate. So it's just a familiarization. Things like, oh, I know the people there. It has nothing to do with it. No capital growth prospects. So the risk, I'd actually argue the risk can be less by buying interstate because you're forced to make that decision based on numbers as opposed to what you've seen in the local area.
Yeah, pretty preconceived ideas as well, because you kind of say, oh, look, I'm not going to buy in that. Whereas that pocket could actually be, there could be a lot of younger families moving into that pocket of the suburb that you know very well, but you don't know that because you just think, oh, no, I'm not looking in those couple of streets because that's where there's 45 housing commissions in whatever sort of, that's the example I'm going to use. But yeah, I think I tend to agree with both of you. Not unfortunately, but yeah, just to keep it. Yeah, you really got to focus on what you actually want to achieve from the investment. Is it kind of sleep at night factor? And even then, you're not going to get that anyway, as I said. She said, great answers. Thank you. I'm not so convinced on mine. Az and Steve's are fantastic. So let's wrap it in a nice bow. What are the sort of steps that you talk to, and then we'll land us home for tonight, guys? What did you say there?
Just to wrap it up, there's a lot that we've covered off tonight in terms of mistakes that we have made and things that can go wrong. But the idea is not to deter you or scare you away from it, but it's just to be aware of these things and to learn from the mistakes of people who have already gone through those hard lessons. But if you plan well strategically, and if you do it consistently as well too, not as a one-off, a lot of the things can go right for you. Yes, there will always be things that will go wrong, but you can minimize a lot of that if you get the planning right to begin with. And what does that planning actually look like? Particularly if you're starting off, that planning is, okay, I need to plan to educate myself, or I need to plan to find the right people in my team, because that takes time. You're not going to just find the right buyer's agent immediately, or the right course immediately, or the right person who can help you immediately. So there's a lot of planning to go, how am I going to find this information? But I think that is how I would summarize it. And to really think of, again, we've talked about it quite a bit in this conversation, but think of it like as a business owner. If you were going to go off and take a loan out from the bank to purchase a business, they're going to want to see what the business plan is before they lend that money to you. If you decide to go out and start a business, you're going to think through and do a planning before you actually start to just purchase or start to just, think about what the product and service is. You'll put it down on paper. You'll have to think about it. But we don't do that when we're doing property investing. We don't treat it the same way. If you do have that mindset, I guarantee you from my personal experience, if you change your mindset, it'll change the way you think. It'll change the way you plan. It'll change the way you execute. It'll change your results.
Perfect.
Yeah. Mic drop. I do have a mic in front of me. I could drop it, but I won't. As Elijah said, what's your next property move?
So the next property move, so there will be, we're looking to purchase again. We've just gone through, I think I just talked about it a little bit earlier, just a restructure of the lending portfolio. So don't want to be having too many balls up in the air. So that's just finalized now, which is fantastic. So we've got a bit more simplified structure now. There is a plan to do it next, but I can't tell you where because I haven't spent the time to do the research yet. So, which actually kind of answers a lot of people's questions here too. Until I do the research, I won't know where the next move will be.
That's actually a good point. Is there's sit on your hands time with property. People think it's this constant thing, but it is. Once you've purchased a property, a lot of the time it's just a sit and wait, and you can get yourself educated from the other stuff. But in regards to researching areas, you might be buying in a year and a half, completely different market.
Yeah. So it's you kind of could be sort of spending a lot of time with your family or just enjoying your life rather than trying to obsess about. You can get up to speed pretty quickly within sort of 4 to 6 to 8 weeks about an area.
It is, but I think the point is that you spend the time educating yourself on how to analyze the data. So not actually doing the data and getting all the research of what other factors can you go on data websites. There's 200, 300 points of data you can analyze. So start understanding those. So at least when you get to that point, you're like, these are the fundamentals I'm going to stick to because it meets my strategy. Then you find the area.
Yeah, exactly. I like it. People are saying great sesh legends of property. Gee, that's too kind. Does that mean I was going to say we have Steve again? Probably will have him again. Thanks very much for jumping on, man. What's the best? I know you don't have any agendas or things to share, but if people wanted to learn more about you and follow along with what you're up to or what you're sort of thinking, what's the best place for people to follow your journey?
LinkedIn. LinkedIn is the best place. I'm not a big fan of social media, so I don't really have any of the other social media channels, both personally or professionally, so definitely not on those. If you want to get in touch or have a conversation, LinkedIn is the best place to grab me.
So it does say property strategist, but I think that's because it's a keyword thing that's my last questions. I've over questions tonight, Elijah said. So it does say property strategist in there, but I think that's more associated with keywords. So that's your LinkedIn there for people who want to know.
I was going to say put up his full name. Do you just want to leave it up for a second so people can get the spelling right? His full name?
Azeem Rahman. But yeah, that's check now for the list of those under 500K hottest market. Somebody's asked me last fire question, Jeff, hottest market that comes to mind. Do you guys know the hottest market? Is it Melbourne? Is it Darwin? Is it Townsville? Like, what do you guys think?
Are they asking hottest market in regards to future capital growth or the hottest market where it's hardest to buy? Because they're completely different answers.
Oh, yeah. I mean, I suppose. Well, the hardest to buy.
There's factor as well too, right?
Yeah, exactly right.
I think it's eased off a touch in Townsville, whereas it's probably amped up a little bit in terms of trying to buy in Melbourne in certain pockets.
Was it you guys that posted on Ozprop that saying it was Darwin, or maybe it was like Scott Agate or someone, that Darwin was the most searched for investors on realestate.com?
Wasn't us. But
yeah, I saw that on social media the other week. Someone actually did the stats, and Darwin was one of the highest. Doesn't mean people are buying there, but it was the most researched.
Yeah, somebody's saying future growth. That's it's too hard to predict future growth. I mean, I could give you. I mean, you'd have to. Yeah, you guys can throw out a suburb or areas, but what do you guys think about future growth, Steve?
I personally like Geelong. We're buying a lot of houses in Geelong at the moment because for 500 to 650, you get a nice 3-bedroom, 600 square meter lot, clean and tidy block, good fundamentals. And again, a lot of the time we're buying clients there because that's their budget. So there are some other, I think, better areas in regards to potentially capital growth, but that's all we've got to work with. So we have to buy, and I think the fundamentals stack up enough that they're actually going to get some good 3 to 5 year growth out of it. Yeah.
What about you, as you probably go do the research, eh?
Yeah, look, I think there's a lot. Look, putting that aside, I think you can't deny the fact that there is a lot of affordability in pockets there in Melbourne, and even if even though the rental yields aren't as strong as it could be, I mean, you got to ask yourself, will those areas across Melbourne and like what you just mentioned, Stephen, Geelong, will those areas in 5 years' time still be in the 500K mark? Probably not. I would really struggle to see that'd still be in that price range. So yeah, I think there is good opportunities there, but I think that it's in pockets.
Yeah, you need to be careful and understand, either go there yourself or understand the local experts, property managers and all that sort of people. Not to say the property managers are going to tell you where to buy. They'll just tell you where there's probably a little bit more potential challenges with tenants. So people are saying, great sesh, guys, lots of hot tips, and not Steve Leesy's blonde hair, because that'll probably come.
In all seriousness, I actually love this session for the sake of, normally it's like we sell the dream a little bit of like, how good's property? Look at all these people with passive incomes, yada, yada, yada. The reality is when you actually talk to any of those people, they've had a horrible journey along the way. It's not a nice thing. Like me personally spent like probably 7-8 years of my life up till 1 a.m., 2 a.m. researching property, and then had 5 or so properties in my portfolio that caused me so many headaches and issues and costs and had to borrow money, yada, yada. Like it's never smooth sailing. And as I said it quite well, is you're going to go through waves.
Nice, guys. On that note, let's go and stop making those mistakes and build those portfolios to as big as we want to the stage. So thanks very much for coming on, Az. Appreciate your transparency and just your genuine sort of real talk. And thanks for co-hosting, Steve. Guest co-hosting, but we'll have you more kind.
As Joe Tucker says, let's go buy some commercial property.
Does he say that? I don't think